No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspective, this is Revenge of the Birds. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. I'm your host, Jess Root. Thank you for listening, as we are just a few days removed from the NFL draft, and tonight is the draft episode. The post-draft episode is, as Seth and I, last week we were on the air and we talked about what the Cardinals were going to do or might do, and hypothetically what was going to happen heading into the NFL draft that finally came after weeks and weeks and weeks of waiting, after mock draft and draft speculation and draft subterfuge and everything that was going along, whether it was real storylines or fabricated or contrived storylines. We're finally getting you to, we had the draft, and now we're ready for actual kind of football. I mean, it's still off season, so we've got OTAs coming up where there's going to be actual football activities going on. The media will be at the events and giving you information, so it won't be just prospect projections. It'll be actual roster projections and roster battles and depth charts and quotes from actual players. And tonight is, like I said, it's the draft night, so thank you for listening. If you are listening live, if you would like to call in and give your thoughts on the NFL draft, whether it be about the league in general or the Arizona Cardinals, give us a call at 646-478-3787. Again, that's 646-478-3787. And this is Revenge of the Birds Radio. If you are following on Twitter, you don't want to call in, but you can send me a question as well. Send that question at Revenge of Birds or at my personal Twitter handle at Senor Jess Root, at SENORJESSROOT. And tonight is all about the draft. So we get started. We look back at what the Arizona Cardinals did. What we have, day one, Arizona Cardinals were set to have the 20th pick in the NFL draft. And kind of the big story of the first round was Johnny Manziel. Yes, Johnny Football. Where was he going to go? How far was he going to drop? And he ended up going all the way to 22. Before that happened, the Arizona Cardinals, who were sitting in the 20th spot, decided to trade back. They swapped picks with the New Orleans Saints, picking number 27 overall, moving back 7 spots, and in the process gaining an additional third-round selection as a result of the trade back. And with that 27th selection, they took Washington State safety Deone Buchanan. I actually learned how his name was pronounced on draft night. It is not Dion as it looks. It is Deone Buchanan. And that is a guy that I was very excited to get. I had hoped that he would be more of a second-round player, but that was all speculation as to where he would end up. The Cardinals got, for my money, he was my favorite player at a position that I knew the Cardinals needed. That ended day one in terms of the Cardinals, as then day two, they had an extra pick. When their pick rolled around in the second round, they picked up Notre Dame tight end Troy Nicholas, really big dude. Fairly new to the position. And we'll talk more about what the picks are once Seth Cox comes on the line, as we're expecting to have him join us, as that way you don't have to listen to me the whole time. Again, this is Revenge of the Birds Radio. I'm Jess Root, your host. If you got a question or a comment, you can call in at 646-478-3787, or you can send me a question via Twitter at Revenge of Birds or at Senor Jess Root. Then we got to the third round draft pick. The Cardinals had two. They had the 84th pick overall and the 91st pick overall with their first of two third-round selections. They took Kareem Martin, defensive end, tall, big, fast. Kareem Martin out of North Carolina. Then a few picks later, it was actually kind of a surprise pick. Hello, surprise! And they picked up kind of the Bruce Arians' perfect wide receiver, John Brown out of Pittsburgh State. He was a wide receiver, a little bit short, super fast, could be dynamic out of the slot. Guy that the Cardinals would like to have to stretch the field. And that was the end of day two. Day three brought us finally our quarterback pick. And the Arizona Cardinals in the fourth round took Virginia Tech new quarterback Logan Thomas. And then in the fifth round went with Alabama defensive lineman Ed Stinson. In the sixth round, And in the sixth round with their final pick, as that was the end of it all, they went, but actually probably this was the surprise, as we're following the draft, and then, Cardinals picked another receiver. They picked up Walt Powell, and that rounded out their draft pick. In 6 rounds, they picked up 7 players, which kind of Steve Keim wanted to do because he wanted to pick up at least one other pick. He was able to trade back in the first round, was able to target a player that they had thought of or had perhaps even given thought about taking at number 20, and they even picked up. So basically for a pick where they had thought about taking Buchanan, they ended up getting Buchanan and a fast receiver in John Brown. So that is what happened with the Arizona Cardinals and their draft of picking up those 6 players and then those 7 players. And then not long after that became the scurry for the undrafted free agents. And the Cardinals signed 15 of them, highlighted by perhaps, there was the rumor that at least at the beginning that LSU safety Craig Lawson would end up in Arizona. He ended up in Jacksonville as was first reported. There was talk that he got cold feet and thought about ditching Jacksonville for Arizona, but in the end landed with them. Picked up a little NAU kid, Zach Bauman, kid that grew up here in the Arizona Valley, went to Hamilton High School, and then went to Northern Arizona University. Local kid that'll make for a great story coming into training camp. But that's what the Cardinals did. They had the trade. They drafted 7 players, and they kind of hit a lot of needs, including the project quarterback in Logan Thomas. They did pass over a few. They did pass over quite a few quarterbacks, and league-wide, the quarterback position was kind of overlooked. It was pushed back, and there was a run on quarterbacks, but it didn't happen until day 3. You had Blake Bortles go early. You had Johnny Manziel go at 22 to the Browns, who did some wheeling and dealing. They traded down, then they traded up, then they traded up again, and it was really, they picked that up. And then Seattle Seahawks, they traded out of the first round. Minnesota Vikings take their pick, and they pick up Teddy Bridgewater. After that, it was kind of quiet on the quarterback front. After which you saw Tom Savage go, and you saw Logan Thomas go, you saw Zach Mettenberger go, you saw Aaron Murray go, you had Jimmy Garoppolo go. He was actually much earlier. You had Aaron Murray and A.J. McCarron and Taj Boyd. They all end up off the board eventually, as it was a day 3 run on quarterbacks, which is kind of interesting how that goes. We're still waiting for Seth to join us as we go online here on Revenge of the Birds Radio. As we're waiting so you don't have to listen to my boring voice the entire time, and we can get some discussion going. And as Seth Cox is our own resident draft expert over at RevengeOfTheBirds.com. If you have not visited RevengeOfTheBirds.com, please do. It is by far, I'm shameless plug, I do run the site, but I think it is the best community of Arizona Cardinals fans you can ever find. And just go ahead on over there, join. It's a free membership with SB Nation. log in, and you can comment, you can post. And we're getting ready to get Seth on the line. I just saw him poke on and then disappear, so I'm sure he will try to get connected. Skype might be giving him some trouble. But we would like to, before we get him on, I'd like to let you know that this portion of our show, as we continue on with our topics of the NFL Draft, first talking more league-wide and generally, and then heading down to the nitty-gritty where we talk about the Arizona Cardinals themselves. This section of our show is brought to you by Audible.com, the home of thousands of audiobooks. For those of you who like to read but aren't always in a position where you can read because you don't have a book or you're too busy, you can use audiobooks to fill your void of storytelling. Hook it up to your iPod, download them as you want, and Audible.com is a place to do that, where they have hundreds of thousands of titles available to you. And right now, you can sign up and pick yourself, download, try it out, and download yourself a free audiobook of your choice. And you do that, you can go to audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. Pick up your free audiobook and test out the service you like. And we now have Seth Cox on the line. We've got Seth on the line, it looks like perhaps on two lines. Seth, how you doing?
Good, yeah. I'm going to keep on my phone just in case my internet's cutting out when I'm trying to get in with you here. So just in case I kick out during the middle, I'll grab my cell phone and we can keep going.
All right. Well, how you doing tonight, bud?
Good. Just finishing up draft stuff and ready to start doing some work on the 2010 and 11 draft grades and kind of go from there.
I guess in some ways for you, the NFL draft work never actually ends because, one, you're either prepping for the current draft, grading the picks that happened, going back to the previous draft 2-3 years ago, how would that go, projecting for... I mean, there's already, I've seen a couple of 2015 mock drafts. McShay put out a 2015 mock draft already. I as much as I love the NFL draft, that's crazy talk.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge mock draft person. Arizona Sports asked me to put out a couple, and I like the 6-round mock drafts that I did with Revenge of the Birds and Arizona Sports, where you kind of you put players in there, but it's more about identifying position and the players that may be available at that time, type of thing. To me, that's more fun, and that's what I enjoy doing. But, you know, it ended up one of the funniest ones, I think, was I did a 6-round mock on Arizona Sports, and I had it was my safety mock where they took a safety in the first round, and I mocked Hashawn Clinton Dixon, and I was just ripped apart by a lot of people that this never happened. He's not going to fall that far. They have no chance to draft him, so why would you even mock that? And then not only do they have the chance to draft him, but they pass and, you know, don't really even hesitate to pass. And you know, from people I've spoken with, I'm sure you've got the same information. It doesn't sound like he was really even considered at 20. So it's kind of interesting just how that all works out in the end.
Well, let's go ahead and get started with the individual draft stuff. We'll start talking league-wide, bring it down to the division, then we'll actually get down to the nitty-gritty where Cardinals fans want to listen to. So, but while we've got probably a broader listening base right here, then let's go ahead and talk about the NFL. If you were to talk about the winners and losers of the draft in general from around the league, who are your winners, who are your losers? Obviously, this is all speculation. This is all stuff on paper, just based on what we know about these prospects, based on value, based on the talent level, based on the needs of the teams. Who are the winners in your opinion?
I think you start with the St. Louis Rams, just because you look at, you know, them sitting there at 2-13, and the thought process when I talked to multiple people about the Rams was they were going to take an offensive player and a defensive player, and the thought process was they'll take either Jadeveon Clowney if he falls past 1 for some odd reason, or or Greg Robinson. Well, obviously they took Greg Robinson, so that opens up the defensive player at 13. Most people have talked about Calvin Pryor, maybe HaHa Clinton Dix, but the fact that you get Aaron Donald, probably one of the top 5, 7 players in the draft, and you get him at 13, that just makes what they did even better. So you start there, you go through the entire Rams draft, and you just look at what they did. Again, you start with Greg Robinson, then you go to Aaron Donald, then you look at the second round. They were able to grab LaMarcus Joyner, kind of their Tyrann Mathieu in a sense. You look at, I'm trying to pull their whole draft up because my internet is, like I said, being weird. You look at later in the draft for them, they get a Trey Mason. I really like the pick of E.J. Gaines. He's a good cornerback, another physical cornerback. When you look at it, that's where it stops. I'm not really familiar with Mo Alexander, so I can't speak to him very much, but the rest of the draft is a lot of interesting people. I'm not going to talk too much about Michael Sam because Michael Sam, the prospect, is a limited kind of pass rusher only, and it's going to be interesting if he can kind of crack the rotation there in St. Louis, or if he's kind of camp fodder for later on.
And interestingly enough, is we're going to talk about the division, but you have to like, from a Rams fan perspective, what the Rams did, at least at the very top of the draft. There are some questions as to what Greg Robinson will project to be. Some see him perhaps being a little bit of a bust in terms of becoming that franchise left tackle, simply because he has not yet developed the pass protection skills. But if they're going to use him right now at guard, as is probably the plan for now, and the one thing he does is maul, you have to really like that. Aaron Donald is a pick that, if he were a couple of inches taller at his position, he would have been talked about, I think, in the same sort of light as Jadeveon Clowney, because he has the athleticism. He had athleticism, like off the chart measurables at the combine. He had huge production in college, and then he lit up the game at their Senior Bowl in the practices. He was all that anyone talked about. The 49ers, out of sheer numbers, you have to say they did well. They have like 87 draft picks. And at that, they picked up a few that seemingly good ones where again, we'll talk more about but you pick up a quality. I know you gushed about Jimmy Ward in terms of the safety position. They pick up they picked up likely the top running back in this class, to pick up Bruce Ellington, a guy that Arizona Cardinals fans hoped and prayed the Cardinals would draft. They ended up going a different direction. And outside of that, you have to like some of them. I mean, Jacksonville gets graded high because, they picked up Blake Bortles, they picked up their franchise quarterback, and they got some weapons for him to throw to in the future. And they got Marquise Lee, who fell further than people expected. You have to like with you have to like the fact that the Raiders were able to land Khalil Mack, and then still address the quarterback position in the second round, going with Derek Carr. Then after that, kind of the team that you at the end of the draft, which you kind of wonder, like, well, they could have done better, and in part that's simply because of the result of what happened in the Indianapolis Colts, because they didn't end up with a first-round pick because they thought that Trent Richardson was worth the first-rounder. Would you say the Colts might have been the ones who came away the most empty-handed out of this draft?
You can say the Colts. I wasn't a huge fan of what they did, even with the pick they had. Jack Newhart is this player. I thought there was better picks and value on the board. Dante Moncrief is a really boomer bust type guy. My favorite pick of theirs was Andrew Jackson, the inside linebacker from Western Kentucky. Big thumper. Kind of reminds me of like a Ronald McKinnon type or a Gerald Hayes, where he's going to be a two-down run stopping linebacker, and you're okay with that in round 6, and he'll have that ability, and there's nothing really bad about that. The Cardinals kind of took that in round 2 last year around Kevin Turner. That's how he kind of projects, so we'll see what happens with him. Other drafts that I wasn't super high on. Seattle. Seattle teams that you look at the name and you kind of shrug your shoulders, but then they end up going to Pro Bowl and being really good. So that's tough to kind of grade. Detroit, I like the Covenant pick in round 2, but Eric Ebron, I'm not a huge fan of. What they're doing with Ebron is going to make sense. They're going to use him like they would have Mike Evans, so it ends up, it ends up being okay in that sense, but I thought there's better value on the board at 10. Travis Swanson, again, another interesting one. Lawson, just they picked a lot of guys that I like, but I feel like they grabbed them early. But of course, from the outside, I'm sure a lot of people feel like that about the Cardinals draft. So, and then I'll say one more thing, and it wasn't I disliked this draft. I just don't like the idea of the Bills giving up a first-round pick in 2015 for a wide receiver in Sammy Watkins, who I like a lot. It just seems like it was a lot to give up to get Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, you have kind of like the I think you have to look at it. Now, granted, it was a much projectable pick in that, but you look at the Colts, who sit without a first rounder this year because of their trade for Trent Richardson, and I wonder if they regret having done that deal. And Richardson didn't really even produce anything. Even if Watkins does become a playmaker, the Bills will be sitting next year unless they're projecting, hey, we've got E.J. Manuel, we're confident in him. We've got Sammy Watkins, we've got this guy and this guy. I'm really confident in what we have moving forward. That'd be the only argument I'd say there, not necessarily. But I bet they'll be in a position next year when they regret not having that first round pick. Much like the Washington Redskins probably felt that way, even though they have their franchise quarterback. You have a little buyer's remorse as you head into a draft and you don't get anybody at the top of the draft. I think even if you have your guy, that's still something that you're like, I sure would like to have someone at the top of the draft. This year it wasn't as big of a deal, let's say, as its reputed deepness or the depth of the draft that there was. We're talking about the next topic. Talk about at the very top of the draft is Jadeveon Clowney ends up going number 1 overall to the Houston Texans. Is he the guy? Is he worthy? Is he going to be worthy that pick? Do you think he will? They will look back and think that he is one of those top of the draft busts, or is he worth? Did he really have? Did Houston really have a choice in the end? And 2, will he become everything that he projects that he could be?
You have to hope so, and not just from the sense of, if you're a Texans fan, but I think from the sense kind of the draft. You want to see these guys turn out. You want to see them work out, because busts are, bad for the NFL in general. So, I know no Cardinals fans would cry if Greg Robinson busted or things of that nature, but it's still a difficult thing. I think in general, with Clowney, you look at him and he's a lot like the guy the Cardinals picked up in 3rd round in Kareem Martin. Similar measurements. Martin not quite as fluid, but similar type of athletic ability. Clowney is just kind of that freak that you don't see often, and while statistically he did not match up to everything you would hope for, he's a very solid prospect. He's a complete monster coming off the edge, and I think kind of worst scenario, he's going to be a pass rush specialist. Does he ever reach that level of like a Julius Peppers where he's a complete player every down? Probably you'd like, but maybe not. But I think kind of worst case scenario, he ends up being kind of like John Abraham or that nature, where they're that elite pass rusher for a decade plus.
which, to be honest, that's not a bad thing to be. And honestly, do you see him matching up as well? I know the Texans, there's talk that they want to actually put them out on the edge at outside linebacker. When I looked at some of the measurables and some of the skill set, I thought, hey, that wouldn't be a bad idea. In fact, I kind of like the concept of him standing up on the edge more than lining up in line. That's just me, though. And I compared him. I thought he looks a lot in terms of his measurables like John Abraham does, who started and is ending his career off the edge.
Yeah, and I think that's people are going to complain about that comp. Oh, John Abraham, that's not it's not a fair comp. You get Abraham. I mean, he's got almost 150 career sacks. That's a lot.
Yeah.
You put that into perspective. That's 10 seasons of 15 sacks. I mean, you really think the Texans are going to complain about that from just a pure numeric standpoint when, maybe only 25% of NFL fans are going to look at it and be like, okay, well, what did he do against the run? How much, how many, kind of the pro football focus look at things. What did he do in terms of, pressuring the quarterback, knockdowns, hits, things like that? People, the other 75% just really don't care. So they're okay with that. They're okay just finding, hey, look, this guy had, 15 sacks a year for 10 seasons. Wow, he was awesome. That was a great number one pick. I think what this boils down to for the Texans really is Blake Bortles, and this may be something we can talk about later, but it boils down to Blake Bortles. If Bortles comes at top 12 quarterback in the NFL, and Clowney is a good pass rusher, and even if he's a John Abraham type force where he's getting 12, 15 sacks a year, a top 12 quarterback kind of trumps anything else in the league. So then they'll have questions to ask, questions to answer. But out of that, I mean, you're not going to chide them too much if they don't take Greg, not for taking Greg Robinson. Definitely not Sammy Watkins or guys like that. The other guy is maybe Khalil Mack. They'll catch some grief on because he was, quote unquote, the better fit, the more pure outside linebacker of the more Romeo Crennel prospect, and they took the chance on the better, specimen, so to speak.
So we look at the next topic. We talk quarterbacks. So we see 3 quarterbacks go in the first round. We see Bortles go to Jacksonville. We see Johnny Manziel land at number 22 for Cleveland, who seemed to have his penchant for drafting quarterbacks at number 22. Whedon, Quinn, Manziel, very, very quite the interesting thing. And then Teddy Bridgewater going right there at the end of the first round as Minnesota trades up to grab him. Trading with the Seahawks. And then we see Derek Carr go at the top of the second round. We see Jimmy Garoppolo go after that. Then after that, you get Logan Thomas, and then the quarterbacks just start falling off the board with Zach Mettenberger or A.J. McCarron and Aaron Murray and all those guys, and Taj Boyd. They all sort of find their place. Tom Savage, too. I don't remember if I mentioned him. What can we expect from any of these quarterbacks in year one? I know that even Bortles, they came out and said that Chad Henne's going to be the guy 2014, and then it'll be Bortles' turn in 2015. Can we expect anything from any of these guys in year one?
Maybe Bridgewater and Manziel. Talking to some Jaguars people on Twitter, it sounds like they're expecting Blake to be kind of the week, I think 8 or 9 guy right after the bye week, barring something from Clowney in terms of Henne in terms of injuries or things of that nature. So the Vikings, I don't really have a lot of confidence in Matt Castle or Christian Ponder, so Teddy could win that. And then Brian Hoyer in Cleveland, maybe. I mean, maybe he's good enough for the first couple weeks of the season, but allegedly the Browns wanted Bridgewater, and the owner stepped in and said, no, you're taking Manziel. So who knows really what to believe at this point, but that's definitely an interesting kind of thing to follow going forward.
Well, I look at the year one. Bortles, maybe he plays or maybe he comes in, but still Jacksonville. I still hold to the fact, and this is my belief, I think that Johnny Manziel, year one, is going to have that dynamic year, whether it's he wins the job at some point from Hoyer or Hoyer gets hurt again like he did last year. I think out of this year, this is the year where Manziel is going to say, oh, people are going to catch attention. I like what, aside from the off-the-field stuff, I've been real impressed with, I see a guy that's super competitive, that's going to work hard because he wants to be great, and he wants to be a great football player, and I see him being able to put the work in. Durability, that aside, I think he will make plays in year one. I think he'll kind of have that RG3 type impact in year one. Other than that, you're going to have some young quarterbacks make some plays and then have some issues. And I already put out there that I think the Browns are going to make the playoffs this year. I think in part because of some of the veteran talent they put around them, the talent they already have. Now, this is before Josh Gordon's possible suspension for the year, so that might change things. But I do like Manziel. He reminds me of a way, and I think his floor to say, I think, will be Jake Plummer, who was, at least in Arizona, an incredibly exciting player. At the same time, he did some bonehead things. So I think that's his floor, and I think he's got a higher ceiling than that if he does what he wants. I think he'll have an impact late year one. Let's talk about the ones that are later in the draft. Where you like some of these guys? You got your Jimmy Garoppolo, you got Derek Carr in Oakland. I didn't even think about him. Oakland, he might have perhaps the best situation. Who knows how Matt Schaub recovers from last year? Does Matt Schaub go? Does he do what happened in Jake Delhomme? Does he go Jake Delhomme on us, and he's never the same after what happened after Delhomme's performance in the playoffs against the Cardinals? He was not the same player after that. Will Matt Schaub bounce back and be stronger than he was, or is he going to be still the guy that can't get out of his mind those pick sixes that he had last year? Perhaps still has the lingering issues from the injury that he had a couple of years ago. Derek Carr could be a good guy to see having an impact, especially with what they want to do there. But the later round guys, you've got Garoppolo, you've got Thomas, you've got Tom Savage, you've got McCarron, you've got Murray, you've got Boyd, you've got Mettenberger. What about these late ones? Why did they go so late? And think about this. Why did Logan Thomas go before any of the other more established quarterbacks?
Thomas went because he's more of a he has the highest. Basically, what you're going to get with Thomas is you're either going to get an NFL starter, or you're going to get a guy that kind of flames out of the league. I made the comment the other day that he has the potential. What if he just develops a solid backup quarterback? I really, from just a pure analyzation of the player standpoint, I don't know if he can do that, because that's a lot of kind of just putting, doing a couple things different and putting some things together and then becoming a backup, and then he's a viable backup, which, again, in the fourth round, we'll get to that, is fine. But I think the chasm is too wide for him to become a backup. He's either going to learn what he needs to learn and put it all together and become a good player, or he's not going to be able to put it all together and he's going to fall out. When you get guys like A.J. McCarron, a name that was brought up here quite a bit, Is he? You look at the Bengals. The Bengals basically are kind of the Cardinals are, in that they're kind of half the fans like, well, look how good Andy Dalton's done. He's got us to the the playoffs the last couple of years. We really want to lose him, blah blah blah. But then you look at the fact that they haven't really been close in any of their to winning in the playoffs yet, and not only that. You got to pay him soon. So you're talking $15 million a year for Andy Dalton. Is that really what you want? Now you're seeing all the fans come out. All right, let's pay Andy Dalton $15 million a year because I sure don't want this A.J. McCarron experiment over here in Cincinnati. Mettenberger, you and I talked about this, I think, right before the draft. There's just too much unknown with his off the field, with his injuries, with a lot of different things to really risk a high pick. He's kind of like Ryan Mallett, not as athletic and coming off an injury, and then allegedly has the back issues as well. So you're talking, knee and back, slow, in the pocket, slow with his release, slow in his, thing. It's just not really a great combination. So it's interesting to see. It's not shocking. I think I made my thoughts on him pretty clear, and I think that kind of lined up, obviously, with what the NFL thought of him. So that wasn't shocking to me that he went that late, because I thought that's, with all the question marks, that was kind of where he belonged. I was actually surprised Taj Boyd got drafted, to be honest with you. So there's that. The interesting one to me, and I know you mentioned Tom Savage, and there's Garoppolo that we can talk about as well. But the really interesting one to me is actually David Fells, Bears. I texted you on Friday morning, and one of the texts I got was the card looking at David Fells on day 3. No, I saw this was this was Friday morning. The Cardinals were interested in David Fells on day 3 if their other quarterback prospect that they were looking at, whose name I did not have, was gone. Obviously, they got Logan Thomas, but Fells was, a target, and he doesn't really fit at all what the Arians model is, but he's going to be behind noted quarterback whisperer Mark Trust. So it's just an interesting way to do things. I think the Fales addition will be something fun to watch from an analyst standpoint, because I like Fales. He has a lot of kind of Kurt Warner-ish anticipation, but he throws the ball like post-injury Chad Pennington. So the question is, can he ever really become anything? You mentioned Garoppolo. Here's what I told Patriots fans. Obviously, they don't like Mallett. So if you don't like Mallett, then why not move on from him? And they obviously like Garoppolo. So if you like Garoppolo, pull the trigger on him. He's worked in cold weather before. He has a really quick release. He has that ability. He's not a big guy at all, but he's a good-sized guy, and he can do some things. And he's not necessarily bad. Next, guy going away from Tom Brady eventually down the road.
And what's interesting this year is that the quarterbacks ended up getting pushed back. Like, why were so many of these quarterbacks pushed back? So, because in years past, and maybe it's just the league getting better about how they draft. It's kind of the pushing it back, especially if they're not sure things. They don't want to risk that first rounder. Because it really didn't seem like there was any overdrafting of quarterbacks, except for maybe you could say the Cardinals overdrafted Thomas in the 4th round, maybe. But at the same time, there were teams calling Thomas behind the Cardinals. He likely would not have been around come the 5th round, and they really liked him better than the other guys that were left. But it's interesting how quarterbacks went from, hey, this is a great quarterback class, and we're going to see a run on quarterbacks on the day 1 and day 2, to being a run of quarterbacks late in the draft. Any thoughts as to why that sort of happened, when traditionally quarterbacks always tend to go earlier than they should?
I think we saw last year kind of this trend start, and it all stems from really truly believe that a lot of teams are afraid. And I kind of use this on my, what I talked about what the Cardinals did in the draft on Rangers today, and I talked about it also on my, kind of quote unquote draft grades in terms of what the Cardinals did. You know what? On a day 3 selection on a quarterback, it's really easy to walk away from 1 year or definitely 2 years later. If the Cardinals, for whatever reason, and Cardinals fans, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if the Cardinals, for whatever reason, end up with the top 5 pick, and Marcus Mariota, Bryce Petty, Brett Hundley kind of take those next steps, and Jameis Winston, all those guys take the next steps, which is, kind of what happened to the other quarterback prospects, but they all take the next step and become, elite. Then all of a sudden you're picking at 5, and guess what? You're definitely going to make the pick of a quarterback, because guess what? Oh, you just took Logan Thomas at 120. It's not like you took Logan Thomas at 20. So I think a lot of teams are afraid. I think the fact that they, everybody's kind of pushed it down. Look, kind of the outcry that the Jaguars had for taking Bortles at 3. You didn't see a ton of people when that pick happened like, oh, great, that was a great pick. The quarterback of the future. This is, their franchise. A lot of people said, wow, that was kind of high for him. Couldn't they have traded down and gotten, or traded back into the first round to get him type thing? That was the first response of everybody. Not, oh, this is the quarterback future. But then you look at, I think it was 3 years ago, or, 3 drafts ago, Ryan Tannehill was taken at 8. Was Ryan Tannehill really a better prospect than Blake Bortles coming out? No, but we just were okay with Ryan Tannehill at 8. It made sense.
Could that simply be a result of this particular draft, where the talent, so the supposed talent depth pool is so deep that you could put on these quarterbacks that you're maybe not quite sure on, you can push back later. And in other years, we might not be able to see that simply because the talent isn't as good across the board.
I think that can be part of it, but look at last year where the draft wasn't that good, and all of a sudden, E.J. Manuel doesn't go till 16. Geno Smith falls to round 2. Mike Glennon falls to round 3. And realistically, you put up, those guys' numbers. I know E.J. didn't play a whole year. Geno's numbers weren't great, but they were along the same lines as other guys picked in the first round. Mike Glennon had 19 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. I mean, I think a lot of teams would have taken that from their quarterback as a rookie. And I think he only played, 12 games or something like that. So you just look at it. I really, truly believe a lot of teams are afraid to invest early in a quarterback because you're tied to the quarterback, and that is your your sentence on whether or not you're going to be coaching a while. You look at the Cardinals, okay. So when Carson Palmer was brought in, say it was really 70-30, I think it was 100% everybody agreed that this was enough to what they had. I think it was about 70-30 where people thought, 30% thought, hey, this is a good long-term fix. The other 70% said, good, this is a nice bridge until we draft a quarterback in 2014. Well, then all of a sudden the quarterbacks in 2014 aren't any good, right? I mean, this was kind of unexpected. Nobody thought, oh, gosh, this quarterback class is terrible when the draft season started. Even when the college season started, everybody said, oh, this is going to be the draft year. You're going to get 6 first-round quarterbacks. I still remember having this argument with you. 6 first quarterbacks. and then it comes down to it. I think a lot of it is that these teams get cold feet. That you look at it and you go, okay, well, I can win 6 to 9, 10 games with Carson Palmer, and I know that. I do not know what I'm going to get if I take Johnny Manziel. I could win 13 games. I could win 3 games because he gets hurt in game 3 without season. So I'm going to stick with what I know, and then I'll draft somebody late, talk about him as my developmental quarterback of the future, somebody that I can mold, somebody that I can shape into the quarterback I want. And then if he doesn't work out, well, in 2015 I can take quarterback. In 2016 I can take a quarterback. I really just think that's what it is. This mentality of I want to take a chance and get burned, and guess what? 2 years I'm out of job and I don't get another chance, especially with a guy like Darren. What, going to be 61 this year? Why take a risk on a guy like Johnny Manziel at 20? Because he quote unquote doesn't fit what you want to do, but take a risk at 120 for Logan Thomas just because he's 6 inches and 60 pounds heavier. Is he really that much of a better? Is he that much better of a prospect than Manziel? No, but the risk at 100 picks later is a lot easier to manage. And that's just my opinion. I don't know if that's true. That's just kind of how I felt about it.
Of these late round guys, think about who has the best chance of making a career in the league. I actually think of the current situation. I think Aaron Murray fell into a really good situation in Kansas City. Kind of what your scouting report on Murray, the things I've seen, made me think, kind of like a Kevin Cobb, kind of that rhythm quarterback, Matt Hasselbeck, who would do well in that sort of setting. And who did he land with? Well, with Andy Reid. What did Kevin Cobb look like when he was Andy Reid? Kevin Cobb looked like a franchise quarterback when he was with Andy Reid. So you have the guy with the skill set of Murray who's really got the football smarts. That's what I like best about him, is the fact that despite the height issue there, he has a good enough arm. I mean, heck, they've got Alex Smith there. He doesn't like throwing the ball further than 15 yards down the field. Even then, he likes throwing little dump passes there and there. It's a perfect fit. And Alex Smith is the type of quarterback where you're always looking to find someone instead of Alex Smith. So he could land himself in the perfect situation because he's got the smarts. He has good anticipation. He can put the ball in the right spot, which means he doesn't have the big arm, so it's not as exciting, not as sexy, but he's going to get his players the ball. And in the offense that Andy Reid likes to run, I think he's going to have himself the best chance of a nice long career. A.J. McCarron, I think, if he doesn't make it as a starter, has the traits that you want in a guy who's smart, he's going to be hardworking, that will last in the league, at least in a backup role for a long time. You said Logan Thomas, he's going to be boom or bust. Johnny Manziel, I think, is going to be the same way. He's going to go boom or bust. He'll be a starter. I don't know if he'll ever make a solid backup just because of the measurables. You don't typically want your backup to be too different than the prototypical type guy. Bortles, Bridgewater, those guys could be great. Those guys could be just other guys. What do you think, especially the late round guys? Who do you have the best chance? Well, let's take the top guys out of the way. We'll take Carr and Bridgewater and Manziel and Bortles out of the way. Which of the late round guys do you think have the best chance of making a career in the league?
Keith Wenning is one of them. Right up picked in this round by the Baltimore Ravens. I think he has a really nice chance. He's kind of a plans Phillip Rivers. I think what he does will allow him to be a 10, 12-year type of backup in the league, spot starter type guy. He's a rhythm passer. He does a good job as a he throws the ball well. He gets the ball out quick. He can move a little bit, but he doesn't have any traits that you look at and go, wow, that could be my quarterback of the future. He's got a lot of traits that he can come in, manage a game, and do a lot of good things, and keep you in games or keep your season afloat for a short period of time if need be. The other guy, as I mentioned earlier, is David Fales. Again, he's kind of in the perfect situation. You could see Jay Cutler get injured because I think Jay Cutler gets injured every year, and David Fales come in for, 2-3 games, light it up, and then kind of get that, Mark Trestman may become the new Andy Reid where he's getting second-round picks for guys that he took in the 6th round, and they're fool's gold because, you know what, as said, you don't really want to trade a guy that you think can be a, quote-unquote franchise player, so... But I think that's what you could get with Fales is the type of guy that can come in, really show out for 3 or 4 games, and then the buzz is, just needs to find another place, and then all he gets another place. And, he's been Auburn, Jay Fiedler, and the other guys that have been Andy Reid guys that were good for a little bit and then ended up not being good.
Well, next we had on our list is to talk a little bit about the NFC West, but time-wise, I don't want to end up spending 3/4 of the broadcast on the national stuff. Let's actually get to the Arizona Cardinals. Before we do, I'd like to let you know again, this is Revenge of the Birds Radio. Seth Cox on the line. I'm Jess Root. You can still call in at 646-478-3787 if you'd like to call in, get your thoughts in, or you can send me a message via Twitter. At Revenge of Birds or at Senor Jess Roots. We did have one question regarding the NFC West. We'll get that question out of the way before we move on to the next segment. And that was that the 49ers and the Rams both drafted kind of rangy free safeties. Is what the kind of the Earl Thomas, the Seattle Seahawks, is the rest of the division trying to mimic them? They got Earl Thomas in Seattle. You've got Tyrann Mathieu here, where you've got the versatile safety who can kind of play in multiple positions. Is that kind of like the new thing that the division was just trying to do, or is that just the talent that was there? Obviously, San Francisco with Eric Reed, and then now picking up Jimmy Ward, and then St. Louis picking up LaMarcus Joyner. Is that what you see they're trying to do, where you're trying to kind of have a big-hitting, box-type safety, strong back there, and then you have your free safety be a little more versatile? Is that kind of the movement that you see there? They're trying to copycat Earl Thomas. Is that what the division is trying to do?
Some people have said that, but I honestly think with Ward, it's his versatility. You talked about it a little bit. He's got the ability to play in the slot. He's going to come in and start at slot corner for the 49ers. And just how important the slot is in the NFL. I mean, you look at the Cardinals, I think it was over 50% of the time they were in 3 wide receiver sets in 2013. So you have that kind of ability to do different things. He can play as a single high guy. He's better off playing in a slot role or closer to the line of scrimmage, much like Tyrann, where you would rather have him near the line of scrimmage wreaking havoc as a ball hawk as a traditional one high safety type. So it just depends on what they're looking for. I think his versatility has made him optimal for what the 49ers want to do. But then you also look at something as simple as the 49ers have to face Tavon Austin, Percy Harvin, and now John Brown, Paul, and Ted Ginn, I guess you can throw in there a little bit. So they need a guy that can match up. Well, Ward's a guy that can match up. He's quick. He's got great feet. He's able to mirror off the line well. He can play in different types of coverages. He's the type of guy that you need to fight back against guys like the ones I mentioned in coverage. So,
well, before we move on to the next section, I'd like to remind you that this next section is brought to you by FanDuel.com. I know many of you listeners out there happen to be fantasy football fans and are already thinking about your fantasy football drafts or your dynasty leagues. Some of you might also be fantasy baseball players. And for that, FanDuel.com is the perfect site for you because it is the biggest site for one-day fantasy baseball, so there's no long-term commitments. No upfront fees. You can play today and win tonight. You get real money. There's leagues that you can enter from $1 up to $1,000. You get a new team every day, and you only have to play when you walked. Right now, we have a special offer from FanDuel for those of you who are my listeners, for the listeners of Reg of the Birds Radio. If you sign up using the codes BIRDS, FanDuel will match your deposit dollar for dollar up to $200. So be one of the first 50 people to sign up using our code BIRDS today. Be a part of the $400 million payouts that FanDuel.com will be giving out. Again, FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com, the leader in one-day fantasy baseball, and that code is BIRDS if you want to get that matching deposit number. And I guess we kind of took a little bit too long as we only got about a half hour left on the show. But now we get to the Arizona Cardinals. We went through the picks before the start of the show. So you got Dale Buchanan, you got Troy Nicholas, you got Kareem Martin, John Brown, you've got Ed Stinson, and you've got who else did I miss? Ed Stinson, then you got Walt Powell, fourth rounder. Logan Thomas, yes, the quarterback. We already talked about him a little bit. Let's go down the picks. First, was that a smart move, the trade? I think based on what they want to do, they were already considering that, well, at least according to what they say, since we know that all NFL people do is lie during the draft. They said they considered picking Buchanan at number 20. If that's the case, getting him at number 27 is better because they picked up a third rounder, which turns out to be a pretty skilled wide receiver. Did you like the trade? Should they have stayed put? Is there a talent they could have or should have gotten instead? What do you say?
I think what they did was smart because, as I said, they were going to take him at 20. Names that I've been told were their first target was Blake Bortles. Obviously, he was not even close to being on the board. I don't think anybody really saw Jacksonville taking Bortles at 3. The last thing I sent to you was that they were, they wanted Bortles. He was the pick if he was there at 20. Sean kind of mentioned that Sean Church of Revenge of the Birds and Bleach Report mentioned that he had heard that the Cardinals were looking to move up. That doesn't necessarily mean it was after Blake Bortles. I think after watching Draft Academy last night that we can kind of safely say that Bortles would have been the target if they had moved up. The next guy we knew about was Ryan Shazier. I think everybody knew it was a really terrible secret that they wanted Shazier. Everybody I've talked to said he wouldn't get past 19 anyways. In fact, he was 15. I think just took some of the sting off of it for fans that really wanted him. The one name that's interesting to me that I have not been able to get confirmation on, I don't know if you have, is Juwan James, who went at 19. A Dolphins beat guy or a Dolphins writer came out and said that, fans were wondering why the Dolphins didn't trade back into the mid-20s with all these teams that traded up and draft Juwan James. And his response was that the Cardinals were taking James at 20. Everybody I've talked to said they were taking Buchanan at 20 at that point. The only reason they moved down was because they knew New England was interested. Sean has said that he's heard that San Francisco was interested, so they knew they couldn't go past 27 where they went to. So, long-winded answer for a short type of thing. It was a good trade because they went as far down as they could. They got an extra pick, but they were able to use on an obvious Arians guy, and that worked out.
And for me, I love Buchanan. I love the skill set of the measurables and the potential that he brings. Now, granted, the film doesn't say that he definitely is going to be awesome in coverage. The team sees an upside of that, and at least what he is, he's tall enough and athletic enough and fast enough to be able to that there won't be the physical limitations. Did you like the pick of Buchanan? Do you think he will be good? And what's really interesting, people compare him to Adrian Wilson and say, whoa, but he's Adrian Wilson with speed. No. Adrian Wilson, actually, his 40 time was better than Buchanan coming out. Adrian Wilson was incredibly athletic. He was a freak, and he was, aside from the height, because he measured 6'3", Buchanan 6'1", they were, of all the other measurables, they were pretty equal. Wilson was equally a liability in coverage to start. He kind of grew into that and then grew out of it as he lost a step or two. But will he fit? Is that a good pick for the Cardinals? I love it. I think he's the perfect safety for what the Cardinals have.
And that's exactly it. Basically, they don't have to change philosophies. So in that case, it makes it a great pick. They don't have to change anything because basically they're getting at worst. And you never want to say this because Jeremiah Bell has been in the NFL for a long time. He's had a very successful career. But so I means as a compliment because if he plays 15 years as a starter, that's a good career. But Deion Buchanan is basically a younger, more athletic Jeremiah Bell at this point.
I've got no problem with that at all. Bell's had a nice career.
Exactly, and what that does for you is it allows you to, again, not change your philosophy, not change what you're doing, and it keeps everything the same. The one thing that and maybe I'm going to be wrong, and I have no problem being wrong. I'm wrong all the time. But I look at this. He's not a man cover guy. Yes, he has the size, speed, length that you want in a man cover guy to kind of take out the tight ends, but he's not as fluid in man coverage as he is in zone. It's something that Kent Hoder and I have talked about a little bit. It's just a weird thing. He's not comfortable. He doesn't flip his hips well. He doesn't play in man coverage well. He doesn't mirror well. He doesn't break on the ball as well when he's in man. He's kind of just a big guy that's in the way. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's better than what they had last year. But it's not his strength. So this whole idea that they're going to be able to lock up tight ends now, I don't see it. Again, it's something he can grow into, much like Adrian Wilson did, and that's kind of what you're hoping for. But let's not expect him to come out of the gate and make those Adrian Wilson comparisons seem accurate right away.
Question. What we saw, I was thinking about how his role might was that kind of to avoid some of those growing pains in coverage. Do you see him being used? Obviously, he's expected to kind of win the safety spot there as strong safety, but it's sort of interesting since he's kind of an in the box now. Jeremiah Bell played almost every single snap on defense. There was only a few snaps he was out the entire year. He played a ton on special teams. He really was a really important part of what the Cardinals did last year. I don't know if we're necessarily going to see him with an every snap kind of guy, especially with some of the guys behind him, where you've got Rashad Johnson and Tyrann Mathieu when he comes back his injury, and Tony Jefferson. I almost was thinking the other day, I wonder if they'll use him kind of in the role that they used Adrian Wilson his last year, at least what Ray Horton did. And they had him out there in base packages where he can do his hitting and thumping. And then in the passing downs, they brought in Rashad Johnson, he's not flashy, he's not fantastic, but he does the job. Might you see that sort of situation in his first year? Instead of being the every down guy, which you see sometimes, is he's eased into the coverage part of things at least, and have him out in base, and then using a guy like Johnson or Jefferson on passing downs.
Yeah, you can see that. You could definitely do something like that where you rotate those guys in and allow him to get his feet wet. He's a good zone guy though, so maybe they'll use him more as that deep safety. He has really good range. Like I said, his range isn't nearly as good when he's man coverage as opposed to when he's in zone coverage. So I think being in a deep zone type of thing, he'll be able to be more successful than he was, he would be as man guy. Yeah, you could definitely rotate him in. Here's the thing. He's going to be excellent against the division where they're going to run the ball, a million times at the Cardinals over the course of the 6 games they play. So you look at and you say, okay, well, for at least 6 games, we'll be able to hold up at the in the run. They didn't do that in 3 of the 4 games against the 49ers and the Seahawks, and they didn't do that even in the win, they didn't really do that against St. Louis that well. So this should aid in that run game defense, and hopefully he offers more and he's able to do more.
Looking at pick 2, and second round, 54th pick overall, they take New England, Notre Dame tight end Troy Nicholas. Big guy, still has upside. It is interesting is they get kind of like one of the things I really liked about this draft overall is there are a bunch of guys that you really see them growing. And it's not a case where you've seen their production there that's kind of going to perhaps mirror, but you've got a bunch of guys whose best football should be in front of them because of their upside. And Nicholas is one of those guys. I like the pick. He fits Arians' role as a tight end perfectly, and has the potential to be a devastating guy. He's not going to be the speedy guy down the field, not the guy that Rob Hauser is supposed to be, but a guy that's going to be basically like another lineman in the game, in line, and to be able to chip and release, and to be able to make plays in the intermediate and short game passing. If we're talking scenarios, could the Cardinals have gotten, say, Coney Ely, a guy that I was high on you as well, which would actually been really interesting to see, because it could have happened where the Cardinals drafted Buchanan in the first round and Ely in the second round, because in the mock I did for SB Nation among the other NFL bloggers, I actually had those two exact picks, but flip-flopped with Ely in the first and Buchanan in the second. Obviously, Buchanan wasn't going to be on the board then. If I were thinking value, one of the things I perhaps would have liked to see differently is had they gone a different direction with that pick, and then in the third round picking up a guy like Cody Fedorowicz. However, as fate would have it, that likely wouldn't have happened. Maybe Troy Nicholas lasts to Houston, and then Fedorowicz makes it further down to the Cardinals. But had the Cardinals gone that direction, Fedorowicz probably off the board, who's the other tight end I liked at that sort of role. So I do like the pick. I can't really complain about that. Is there any other pick at that point is there any other player on the board that you think might have been a better fit or a better value or better player available than Nicholas at the time?
I don't think so. There were a lot of different ways they could have gone. So I know people are upset. I've seen people upset about passing on Coney Ely. I'm fine with them passing on Coney Ely. I like Coney Ely, but I liked Kareem Martin in the third round better. You look at, kind of just the names that were right there after him. You have Devontae Adams. They didn't really need a wide receiver that big and not fast, so they're not going to draft him. I know some people want to Carlos Hyde. You want Carlos Hyde almost just so he doesn't go to San Francisco at that point.
And that's where he goes.
Jack Mewhort, and again, I talked about him a little bit with the Colts. Not my cup of tea. I think Mewhort's basically Nate Potter or Bradley Sowell, in that he's going to be a guy that's on your roster for a real long time. Just not going to be a guy that necessarily want starting, as you said earlier, is a guy you're always looking to replace. Then at the beginning of the third round, like you said, C.J. Fedorowicz goes, Morgan Mose goes, another guy, Billy Turner, another guy that maybe you can look at in round 2 at pick 20 of round 2 to be happy with, but I was happy with the pick of Nicholas. Here's the thing, Nicholas. Basically, they were able to pick up an offensive lineman with that 20th pick in round 2, because that's what Nicholas is going to be at work. He's going to be a guy that you can line up and put next to Sal or Massey or, God forbid, Jared Veldier, and you can run power off on the left side with Veldier and Nicholas down blocking and Jonathan Cooper pulling out, kick out or blocking out on the edge there, and you get a guy, you get a really, really nice power run game there on the edge, kind of that power play that you can run. And you don't have to worry about, oh gosh, is he going to have to double team with Veldier? You can block down on the defensive tackle with Veldier. You can block the defensive end. You can have Cooper come around the edge, look out there. It's a really good addition because of what he do in the game. And then you add on to the fact that he does have good hands. He doesn't run good routes necessarily right now, but that's just kind of out lack doing it for a long time. He's only been a tight end for 2 years. And, he uses his size better than most prospects do coming out that haven't played the game for a long time. So that's what you have to like about him the most, is that he'll be a receiving option simply because he does things or he understands how to do things with his body, and he uses his hands to catch. So everything's really comfortable at that part.
What you mentioned about the whole jumbo package there as another offensive lineman, actually something I hadn't thought about till just now, which I really like, is last year the Cardinals would come in with their triple tight end set or their jumbo tight end set, and they'd use Bobby Massey as a tackle eligible. With Nicholas, you don't have to do that, which doesn't. And while it's still kind of it's still a definite running down in that situation where it's lined up that way, it doesn't completely tip their hand, which is what Arians loves about the tight end position. If you've got a guy like Nicholas there, if he's out there on that jumbo package, it doesn't necessarily mean, if Bobby Massey's in the game, they're going to run. Nicholas out there gives them that slight possibility that they could run him on an outlet. Third round, we got 2 picks. You got Kareem Martin. You were very, very high on him. And then we got John Brown, another very skilled receiver. The Kareem Martin pick, and it looking back with the potential, you take a Coney Ely and then Fedorowicz in round 3, or would you rather have Nicholas and Martin in round 3? I think the Cardinals got the best scenario there. They have a tight end with bigger upside, and they have a guy in Martin who, my goodness, the measurables are off the chart, and for some reason didn't get any sort of the love that Jadeveon Clowney did. It's interesting. He's there, at least the Cardinals right now are going to have him play outside linebacker when, which is, I haven't listened to the quotes yet, but some of the quotes are talking about they see him as kind of a Calais Campbell clone. Which is it going to be? Do you think he'll be successful? Or do you think he'll be good coming off the edge, being a little bit bigger than taller, a little bit bigger John Abraham? Obviously, he's not going to be quite Matt Shaughnessy's slow. I mean, he's strong, but oh my goodness, he's got no burst when it comes to the pass rush. Or do you see him bulking up and becoming more of a defensive lineman, or is that just they don't know which way they want to go with him yet, depending on how his body fills out?
And I think that's what it boils down to, is that, with the way where your defense is right now, you can do different things with him and figure out what he does best. So you're not in any really hurry right now. Obviously, if Father Time catches up with Abraham like it's going to, and it happens before you're ready, then that's a whole different, kind of talk to have. But you can't fill every position in the first round with first-round talent. So they didn't really have a chance to necessarily draft a first type of guy at outside linebacker that they were comfortable with. So they went ahead and waited. They got Martin, and he's kind of that guy that we talked about way back in February, where he's that hybrid guy that can play down with his hand in or he can stand up on the edge and do different things. He's going to have a similar role to what Matt Shaughnessy had last year, except that it's just kind of be reversed, and where that he'll be in on more of passing downs and see if he can rush the passer, versus where Shaughnessy was just had to run passer because he was out there, but he was really as a run down type of guy. So on first and second down against San Francisco, Seattle, and St. Louis, well, you're going to have Shaughnessy out there on third down. Maybe you come with a package of Abraham, Campbell. You bring in a guy, like for Abraham, Campbell, Dockett, and then you bring in a guy like Martin and bring him off the edge as a defensive
I was
end.
just thinking about that. That would be, well, their typical defense, their nickel setup is typically 2-4. You end up with Dockett and Campbell. Would be really interesting to see. That would be fun to see. Instead of, because last year was a whole bunch of Abraham and Shaughnessy, and that was in part because of injuries. But to have Abraham on one side and Martin on the other, woo, that could be fun.
Yeah, and that's what you're hoping, is that he uses that athleticism in year one to make an impact. You're not expecting him to have that Aldon Smith, whatever, I think he had 14 sacks his rookie year. You're not expecting that. But even if you get 7 sacks and he's a part-time player, I think everybody's going to be happy with that. Especially out of round 3. And what that means is that you have something that you can grow on. This isn't Sam Acho picked in round 4, and that's who you're looking at with guys, that's a guy that gets by on motor and kind of instincts. This is a guy with freakish athletic ability, similar to Javian Clown in his athleticism. So you know that he's a special athlete. The question is, can he reach that potential? If he can't, well, then it was a third-round pick. You look at the third-round pick history of the Cardinals. We complain about Hausler, but it's not like he's killed the Cardinals from the sense of, oh, God, I can't believe we drafted Rob Hausler. Same thing with Andre Roberts. He was supposed to be the guy next to Fitz. Well, he was so good that they go draft a wide receiver at 13 the next year or 2 years later. So
actually, a recent third round is not so good because they got Jamel Fleming, you've got Rob Hausler, you've got Andre Roberts, and
Buster Davis.
They're just sort of guys. They're just sort of guys at the position. And
so that's what you just hope Overmart is able to do, is come along slowly, put it together, and then in year 2 or definitely year 3, kind of break out. And then you can kind of sign to a long-term team-friendly for like 4 or 5 years, and then not to worry about overpaying him. Because if he does truly break out, that's when you have to start to worry about it, especially because there's no 5th-year option for round 3 guys. So,
and we look at John Brown, another one. It surprised me. I mean, it shouldn't have surprised me. He was actually one of the receivers you specifically targeted as a Bruce Arians perfect fit receiver back before the combine even started, and we have the article to prove it. But his skills, he's fast. The measurables this is actually I saw on Twitter thanks to Sean Church, and I looked it up and put it on a post where he is essentially T.Y. Hilton to a T. Only he's a little bit taller, he's a little bit faster, and is a little bit stronger. Which is interesting since they signed Ted Ginn. It's almost like if Brown develops quickly, if he can be a playmaker in the slot, you might not see much of Ted Ginn on the field, which he's really kind of, it might not be a bad thing. Ted Ginn has kind of been a disappointment at the receiver position, as we've talked about, and keep them there at the return game and have Brown there making plays down the field. Sure, there might be, but I like the position. I love the fit, and I love the speed, and he's the exact type of receiver that Bruce Arians. So I can't complain a whole lot about it because Bruce Arians is about developing that offense. He has a plan in place. He has a vision. And then you've got John Brown, who is the perfect fit for that vision.
Well, you go back to Bruce Arians' time as a Steelers offensive coordinator and the Indianapolis Colts offensive coordinator, and this is going to be the 4th draft that he's been a part of in an organization that they've double-dipped at wide receiver, and that's the thing is, you said T.Y. I see him as Mike Wallace, who Arians really liked. Not necessarily a guy that the Cardinals, would go after and pay, but that type of receiver. He's a little smaller, just a little bit smaller than Wallace. But they got Wallace at the same spot. They put Wallace at 84. The Cardinals got John Brown at, I think, 91.
91.
So
yes.
So you're talking about a guy in the same spot. linear athlete, able to get up and go off the line of scrimmage. He has that, one of the things that you talk about Mike Wallace and even Ted Ginn, you watch them run, and it doesn't seem like they ever go faster, from start to finish. They're always at the same speed. He takes off, and he's at that 4.34 speed, and that's just kind of what he does. He's going to take the top off the defense. That's the hot term right now, but that's what they're going to want him to do. And this was clearly an Arians influence pick. This is what Arians wanted. He told Steve Keim, I want this in my wide receiver. So obviously Steve Keim had a higher grade on John Brown than any of the other wide receivers that were drafted after that. That includes, everybody's favorite, Mr. Bruce Ellington.
Yeah, and that was the one shock on that. And I think more than anything, Ellington became a name because of Andre Ellington. And Bruce Ellington, while he would have been a good fit, obviously John Brown does. If he was looking at it, if they were looking for T.Y. Hilton, if they're looking for Mike Wallace, guess what? They found him. And I think he's going to be quite productive. Fourth-round pick, you have Logan Thomas. We already talked a little bit about him earlier, so he's going to kind of be boom or bust. Do you see him? I mean, how long do you think they'll give him? I wrote a piece today. Okay, today is Wednesday. I wrote a piece on Wednesday, as I have to remember the whole downloading with the podcasting. I wrote a piece on Wednesday about the situation, the drafting of Logan Thomas. It probably means, and I believe that means that the Cardinals are going to, assuming that season starts off with him performing pretty all right, is that you're not his contract technically voids about a week after the Super Bowl. It's not written more. It's an option. They can easily take that out, so it'd be one more year. But if they're going to do that, I think we're going to see Carson Palmer extended for 2 years. Whether he's playing for 2 more years, or because I think that second year that they're going to tack onto that is simply as part of negotiations where it creates that security for him, or he could come back if he wants or not. But I'm going to see him extended for 2 years beyond, so through 2016. Ideally, I would think if Logan Thomas does the development, then that final year, Palmer they cut him or they trade him or he retires or whatever, and then Thomas takes over. I don't think he's going to be ready after only 1 year. I'm thinking 2016 season is earliest that we're going to see Logan Thomas on the football field. And I don't love the pick in terms of what I think he can become as a quarterback. Seen too many of these late-rounder guys with great arms but little touch and little accuracy. John Navarre, not good. John Skelton, no, not really. Ryan Lindley, no. We just really, Derek Anderson, he was a higher touted guy coming out, but great arm, not good accuracy. So I really don't hold out really any hope that Thomas is going to become a good quarterback. But I see that if he does develop, I think we're not going to see him until 2016.
And that's the thing is here's basically what you want. I've been told on several occasions, on occasions when we're together, that the coaching staff and organization is not thrilled with Bob. We don't want to hear that with Logan Thomas, And I think that's what it kind of boils down to. If you don't hear that, he's struggling and not able to throw the ball or not able to get the ball out, or all of that, the negative stuff that we hear about Matt, that he can't figure it out, and you hear that about Logan Thomas, well then guess what? I think in 2015, quarterback again just kind of goes on the board. But if they're comfortable with his growth where he's at, I think you hit it on the head. They're going to offer something like 2 years, $25 million. They'll say $15 million guaranteed, probably $12.5 the first year, and $2.5 guaranteed the second year. Where if they feel like Thomas can guy in 2016, it's by Palmer. If they don't and they're not drafting high enough, then it's okay, we'll keep Palmer 1 year. We're only on the hook for $2.5 guaranteed, but on the hook for $12.5 million again, and we'll draft another quarterback. That's basically where I think that's going. Thomas Smith has to get his footwork down. His upper body and his lower body really have to get into kind of congruence together in order to be effective and in order to up his accuracy. He has to learn to throw the ball with different velocities as he's throwing the ball. The things that you watch with him is he sometimes takes too much off on passes he should put more on, and other times he's trying to rifle the ball in there when he's not supposed to. His name is going to send shivers.
Sounds like I'll be honest. Sounds like Derek Anderson. It sounds like Derek Anderson.
Yeah, so he got some Derek Anderson in that case, but he's much more athletic. And one of the things that I talked to a scout about, and that's been reiterated, I think it was Chris Brown, I believe is his name, from Grantland, wrote the piece on the top quarterbacks. You can mold a mobile quarterback more than you can a quarterback that is Zach Mettenberger, where he doesn't have that athleticism, and you can mold a guy like Logan Thomas into learning how to do things better with his upper body and lower body, because he's got some athleticism to him. He's got an arm that you can't teach A.J. McCarron to have. So while McCarron, has that hitch in his delivery, and he's got, but he's got good feet, and he kind of understands where to go with the ball, you can't teach McCarron what Logan Thomas already has. So I think that's where the draft pick came in. I think that's where Arians' mind is. And I think the fact that he was pick 120 really good to show you that they're not really overly concerned about it. If he works out, that's great. We have a really cheap quarterback for hopefully, maybe 2.5 to 3 years. Colin Kaepernick's where I really point this out at. They're going to Kaepernick him as much as possible. He's going to come in, and they're going to hope that in 2014 Palmer plays well enough that you can't replace him, much like the 49ers did with Alex Smith. In 2016, that Palmer is either still the guy, and they can slowly transition Thomas in, or they can move on because Thomas is ready and ready to take it.
You look at the final two picks for the Cardinals. You've got Ed Stinson, and then you've got in the 6th round, you've got Walt Powell. At that point of the draft, they're just sort of guys that if they could fill any role at all, great. I know you like the Stinson pick. If he can be a rotational, if he knows his role, if he doesn't feel like he has to be anything more than, hey, I'm going to come in for a few snaps, I'm going to make a few tackles, I'm going to hold up the line of attack and do my job and come off the field for a few snaps, come back on again, then it's great value. What you essentially need is with your 5th and your 6th round guys, you don't need stars. You need guys that do something, and I think that's what they got. Any issues with those two picks?
The Powell pick, and you kind of hit the nail on the head with the Stinson pick. He's a plug and play type of guy that he did at Alabama. He was a rotational guy at Alabama. That's why he fell down the draft so much. It wasn't because of his ability, it's because he's not a guy that is going to come in and play, 80%. He's a guy who can play 35, 40% of the snaps, and maybe eventually move up to more. But he's going to be a stout run defender. Realistically, you could play him alongside Darnell Dockett's having a tough game. You can play him alongside Clayus, Dan, or Alameda Tamu, and bring in Shaughnessy to be your outside backer, and all of a sudden run defense is really, really good. And I think that's going to be important in NFC West. The Walt Powell pick is interesting. I hadn't heard of him, completely open book. After the draft pick, I went on YouTube. I found highlights of him, and there was this really cool cut up where they had basically every touch he had as a senior. And basically what he is a space player, kind of like Andre Ellington in that one. You get the ball in his hands and you let him create. He's just a wide receiver when he does it. There's a lot of Antonio Brown in him. Again, at Mike Wallace draft, they also drafted Antonio Brown. That's kind of who he's going to be for Arians. He's going to come in, he's going to work his butt off to get a spot on special teams and make an impact on special teams, and then he's going to look to start making plays as a fifth wide receiver slot type of guy and work his way up the depth chart. It would not shock me to see him, become a number 3 wide receiver in the NFL because of his ability to make plays after the catch. He doesn't run routes right now. He has a very limited route. What I've seen, that's
okay.
What he was asked
we are
to
up
do.
at the end of the show. Real quick before we close, and thanks for having us on. I'm sorry to cut you off, Seth. We have the show's going to cut off, so I want to say good night. Thanks for coming on, Seth, tonight. Thanks for downloading and listening to the show. Bold prediction for who's going to be the biggest pick? I think Terry Martin is going to have our biggest impact in year one. What do you think for you?
I think I'm with Mark, the guy that makes the biggest impact.
All right. Thanks, Seth. Have a good night. Good night, Cardinals fans.
See you, Jess.
You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/revengeofthebirds.